Hello and welcome to this course on WordPress security from beginner to htaccess. I'm David, your instructor, and I want to use this video to personally thank you for choosing this course. I'm proud of you for taking security seriously and committing to learning how to protect your WordPress website and minimize the risk of a successful attack. I designed this course around the concept of adding multiple layers of security to WordPress. The main takeaway is that a compromise in one layer of security shouldn't compromise the whole of your website. That's what this course will teach you. So let's get started, and I'll see you in the next lecture. So we're going to set the best viewing experience in this lecture. I'm using the Chrome web browser on Windows. If you're using another web browser or maybe the app on the tablet for Udemy, you'll have access to similar settings, but for demonstration purposes, I'm using Chrome on Windows. If we go to the bottom right-hand corner of your browser window, you'll see a little control panel pop up with some different settings. So this is what we'll focus on. By default, the speed is at 1 times speed. If you find I'm talking too slowly, just increase the speed appropriately. For the sound, make sure that it's turned up to the maximum. Just to do that, drag it up the green bar, as you can see there. But this is the main setting I wanted to draw your attention to. It's the quality, the video quality. I've got it set to 1080p, which is indicated by the little green dot there. So click the 1080p, and this will bring it up in full definition, full high definition, and it'll be nice and clear as we move forward. Thank you, and see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to run through the core software toolkit that we'll need as we move forwards in this course. As I mentioned in the course introduction, some students may already have these or other alternative tools installed on their systems, which is great. If you're comfortable with using them, please carry on. For those students that don't have any of these tools, we'll just quickly run through them now. So the first being a text editor. This is used for editing configuration files that we will be doing both in WordPress and the htaccess file. These editors don't include formatting characters such as bold, italic, or being able to increase the font size, which these systems won't recognize. So we just want plain text. The Atom text editor I find is great. It's easy on the eye, it's free, and it makes editing files quite easy. The second tool is a straightforward archival tool, 7-zip. Most of you may have heard of that already or have something installed that's similar. And last of all, we'll need WordPress itself. As we are securing WordPress, we'll download the latest WordPress binaries from wordpress.org. We'll make some modifications to some configuration files before we securely upload them to our web hosting provider. Before we end this lecture, I thought I'd switch over to our web browser just to show you the websites for the individual tools we'll be downloading. For the Atom text editor on the home page, you can clearly see a Download Windows Installer button. Just click that, download the installation file, run the executable, and that'll install the text editor for you. If we switch to the 7-zip homepage, we'll see a couple of links. There's a 32-bit and a 64-bit version, depending on the bit level of Windows that you're running. Choose the appropriate one, click download, and again just install that in preparation. I'd go for the 9.20 version. It's a few years old, but more stable. If you're feeling a bit game, you could go for the later version. If you feel like having a look at that, you can, but I tend to aim for stability. So I'll go for the 9.20 version. And last but not least, we will be securing WordPress, so we'll need to get the WordPress binary files. On the home page, you'll see this Download WordPress 4.3.1 button. Click that. And on the second page, you'll see a direct link. It's about 6.8 megabytes in size, so it shouldn't take too long to download. Thanks very much. If you've got any questions on this, please ask a question in the discussion forum, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Okay, so what is this onion thing about? Well, security is like an onion because it has layers, multiple layers, and each layer of security uses different tools or controls to safeguard a system, such as firewalls, security scanners, encryption, and web server or operating system hardening. And these layers are designed so that a weakness or exploit in one layer doesn't allow a risk to the system as a whole, as the other layers continue to provide protection. Each layer provides a barrier to gaining access to the core, and in this case, the core is your WordPress website. And that's the goal of this course. It's so that you can learn how to implement multiple layers of security on your own WordPress website, which ultimately minimizes risk and maximizes protection, so that one little exploit or vulnerability in one layer doesn't compromise your whole WordPress website. You've almost got backup layers that can stop an intruder or a malicious script trying to get through to your core, which again is WordPress. So let's spend a few moments looking at the layers of security that we'll be implementing as part of this course. The first being securing your connection to your WordPress website. And why would we do this? Well, to prevent what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. If you're sitting in a coffee shop, for example, using that coffee shop's wireless network, there could be other people in the coffee shop with a laptop, and a hacker could be sniffing the packets between other people's laptops and the internet, and monitoring for things like usernames and passwords. So we'll try and prevent that by happening by securing the connection to your website. We'll look at hardening WordPress and the different settings available there. We'll install a plugin that does some monitoring and alerting. So while security is primarily around preventing people compromising your website, it's also important that we monitor and we get alerted appropriately if we have a security breach. We'll also look at a backup and recovery plugin, so that if your website is compromised at all or you need to restore to a known good configuration, I've got a great plugin that'll help you get back up and running as soon as possible. We'll also look at some local environment security recommendations, as well as some general ongoing best practices to keep you as secure as possible. Thank you, and see you in the next lecture. In this short lecture, I just wanted to cover off when the best time to secure WordPress is. And the answer? Well, ideally, before you install WordPress. Many hosting providers offer automatic WordPress installations via their cPanel or similar management dashboard. You may have heard of htaccess or Fantastico, which are two very popular automatic installation methods. And look, they're great, they make life easy, and I think they're okay for short-lived test sites, or maybe you just want to spin up a quick WordPress instance to play with. But for installations that are intended for long-lived or for production, a pre-prepared secure package is the way to go. So take caution with the automatic WordPress installations. If you really want the best security, prepare a secure WordPress installation package beforehand. And these are the steps we're going to walk through in the next few lectures. So remember, you're in control of the source files and the settings that go with it, and being in control is the key to security. The final step in the WordPress installation process is just to do a bit of a post-installation cleanup. So we'll do some of that within the WordPress dashboard that's here, and there's also some residual files on the web server that we'll also delete. So as we're in the dashboard, we'll just go to delete the sample posts that come with it, which is hello world. So we don't need that, we'll get rid of that. Move to trash and apply. We'll also go to plugins. If you don't want any of these plugins, I don't think they have any benefit for a fresh installation unless you want to use Akismet. But again, select all, bulk actions, delete, and then click apply. And yes, delete these files. No plugins installed. If we go to our file manager now, there are some files that we should delete just to complete it. There's a readme.html. In fact, if we open that file on our web browser, we can see that immediately it tells us the version of WordPress that we're running. So any, again, idiot bots, malicious scripts or hackers can append a readme.html to the URL of any WordPress website, and if that file is there, it will return the version, and if there's any specific security vulnerabilities that have been identified or exploits, then they can target them according to the version we're running. So if we delete that file, then we'll also hide the version that we're running. Go back to our file manager in cPanel, just highlight readme.html, right click and delete. And I would also apply the same to the license file. That also contains version information. There's one more file in wp-admin. If we go into there will be an install.php file. And there it is. Again, we don't need that anymore because we've completed the install. It's one less file to be targeted. So that completes the secure installation of your WordPress website. Thank you. Well, first of all, well done to you, and that's great work. I think you've probably performed more steps than a typical WordPress installation would have. So great work. We'll just quickly recap over the steps we've performed. So we created a non-default database name, making it harder for a potential hacker or malicious script to guess the database name. And similarly, we changed the default WordPress table prefix as well. We then added salt keys to the wp-config.php file. We created some complex passwords, and then we securely uploaded our WordPress installation package over an HTTPS connection. And then finally, we did a post-installation cleanup. So great work again. I think we've laid a good solid foundation, and then we'll move on to the next lecture covering WordPress user roles. Thank you. In this lecture, we're going to cover how to install WordPress securely and the different steps that we'll need to follow. First of all, we're going to prepare our web hosting account for a secure WordPress installation. Then we're going to create a secure WordPress installation package from the WordPress binaries. Then we're going to upload the WordPress install package, and we're going to upload it over a secure connection. And then we're going to perform some post-installation cleanups. So with that, let's get on with preparing our web hosting account. In this lecture, we're going to cover preparing your web hosting account for a secure WordPress installation. As you'll learn in lectures later in the course, WordPress is made up of several components, directories and files on your web server, and also a database that holds most of the content, especially around your blog content. So the first step is to create a database, and that's the focus of this lecture. So if we scroll down in our cPanel, it'll look similar or identical to your cPanel with your hosting provider. We'll come to a databases part, and if you click MySQL databases, we'll then come to the screen where we create a new database. So the prefix is already selected by your hosting provider. We're just going to add a random suffix. We click Create Database, and that's just confirmed that it's added the database for us. We click Go Back, and now we're going to create a new user account, a new MySQL user account that will be used to have privileges to access the database we've just created. Again, I'll just create a random suffix, and for the password I'll use the cPanel's inbuilt password generator. So I'll click Password Generator. That looks nice and complex, alphanumeric, upper and lowercase. I'll copy that to my clipboard, and I'll click Use Password. So it populates the fields for us, giving us a 100 out of 100 strength index. And then we click Create a User. So it successfully created the MySQL username wp-test-ho_16vusr. So fairly straightforward. So now we've got the database, we've got the user account. We're now going to add the user account to the database. So at the bottom we just click Add, and we're going to assign all privileges, which is required for WordPress. Click Make Changes, and we get a confirmation message saying you have successfully granted the privileges on the database. We then click Go Back, and that concludes preparing the web hosting account. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so in the last lecture we created the WordPress database. Now we're now going to switch to the directories and files side of WordPress, and for that we're going to extract the zip file that we downloaded earlier in the course. So I'll just go to my source files directory where I keep my binaries, and here is the WordPress 431 zip file. If we right click the zip file, the context menu shows 7-zip if that's what you're using. If you're using another archiver, you'll probably see another similar menu, and we're just going to extract the files here. So the files are extracted into this folder, and this is the WordPress directories and files that I was referring to earlier. The specific file we're after is the wp-config-sample file.php, and if we right click that, we'll open that in the Atom text editor. If we scroll down, we'll come to a list of settings that we need to fill with the details we created in our cPanel regarding the database names, users and passwords. So I'll just copy and paste those into the relevant fields. So for the database name, I'll just paste that here. You may remember it from the previous lecture, 15vdb. And similarly for the user account, we'll just paste that here. And we'll paste the complex password that we got cPanel to generate for us. Nice and strong. And that's the database section. We scroll further down, we're going to add some salt keys. So very quickly, salt keys or security keys refer to 4 authentication keys and 4 hashing salts, which are random bits of data. And both of those work together to add an extra layer of security to cookies and passwords. The security keys help to encrypt data that's stored in cookies, and that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for the idiot bots or hackers to compromise your website using cookies. So this is a good security measure to take, and again it forms part of adding multiple layers of security. So to add the authentication and salt keys, we'll just go to this URL in the file, we'll copy that to our clipboard, we'll open our web browser, and we'll just paste the URL in. And here we can see 4 automatically generated encryption keys, or sorry, authentication keys and salt keys. We'll copy that to the clipboard. We'll go back to Atom, and we'll just replace this whole section here. And there we go. So we've pasted authentication and salt keys. And the last setting that we need to change is the WordPress database table prefix. Default installations, if you don't change it, will have WP_, and again that becomes a known potential attack vector that any idiot bot, hacker or malicious script will try to target. If that's where they want to do a database injection, they'll automatically put WP_ as part of that, and if you haven't changed it, there's a chance they may get in. So we're just going to put some random figures and numbers in here. Something like that. Yeah, if they can guess that, good luck to them. The rest of it's good, so we're just going to save this file, and then we return back to our Windows Explorer, and we just need to rename this file to remove the sample, because now we've actually got a pre-configured secure installation package. Now what we're going to do now is re-zip up this file, because to upload it to our web host, one zip file will upload a lot quicker than just uploading this whole file and directory structure with multiple files in it, which can take a bit longer. So I'm just going to select all of the files and folders, go to the 7-zip and add to WordPress.zip. And there is our pre-configured secure WordPress installation package ready to upload. So we go to our cPanel of our hosting provider, and we open up the file manager utility that we're going to use to upload the WordPress zip file that we've just created. So public_HTML is the name of our web root here. It may be You may see www root as an alternative, but effectively it's the root of the website that we want, and as we don't have anything in there, that's why it's empty. Now I prefer using the cPanel file manager because all communications are encrypted. If you come up to the web browser, you can see that the HTTPS protocol is used, and that means that all connections, uploads and downloads will be encrypted, and this is a much simpler way. I have seen and heard other people using the FileZilla utility, and that's fine, and you can actually encrypt communications, but I recommend using the cPanel's file manager. It's quite mature now, it's fully functional, you can copy, you can download, you can extract zip files as well. So copy and manage all files using the inbuilt file manager. So we're going to upload. Which is in this directory here. We'll leave the default permissions and we can see that it's uploading it. We'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so the WordPress.zip file has now completed its upload to the public_HTML folder. So now we're going to extract the zip file. So we'll just go to our panel at the top, extract, and we'll just extract to the web root. We'll close that, and there we go. We have the same folder structure that we had on our local system now running on our website. The other recommendation I'll do is I will delete the original zip file just for security. Now what we'll do is we'll actually run the WordPress installation by pointing to our domain name, and this will start off the WordPress install to complete. And there we have the initial installation. So we'll select English United States or the language that you require. We click continue. Site title, so I'll just put my WP test host. Username, now this username is for an administrator account, so I don't recommend that you actually create one called admin or administrator. Choose something that's fairly generic, and in my case I'll just choose Peter. I'll take that password they suggest, nice strong alphanumeric. I'll just put that in my working file here, and I will have the details emailed to my admin account mailbox that I've already set up, and we'll click install WordPress. And that's it. It's as simple as that. WordPress has been installed. Were you expecting more steps? Story to disappoint. So if we go to click login and we go Peter and the password, and there we go. So that's it. We've created a secure WordPress installation package. We've connected it to our pre-prepared database. We've run through an initial install. So this what I would regard as a very good, secure way to get a WordPress website up and running. Hope you enjoyed the lecture. If you have any questions so far, please feel free to add to the discussion on this course, and I'll see you in the next lecture. With great power, there must also come great responsibility, by Stan Lee. In this lecture, I want to cover WordPress user roles, explain the privileges of each role, and why it's important to choose the appropriate user role depending on what that user will be doing on your WordPress website. When WordPress is installed for the first time, an administrator account is automatically created for you. The name of the administrator account is specified by you during the installation of WordPress. You may recall in an earlier lecture when we installed WordPress, we were asked to enter a username. Well, here's a screenshot from that lecture where we entered Peter as the administrator account. The recommendation here is avoid naming this first user account as admin or administrator, as this is a popular account name to target for brute force or password guessing attacks. So we're in the WordPress dashboard and we're going to dive into the user accounts a bit more. If we look on the left menu, we'll see a users option. If we click that, we'll see that our username that we created during the installation of WordPress is shown, Peter. And if we look to the right, we can see the role administrator is assigned. And again, this is the automatically created administrator account that is set up during the installation of WordPress. If we click into the name Peter, we can see the username Peter, and this is something that we can't change, the nickname Peter, and the display name. And it's this display name that is the name that appears on blog posts. If we switch over to a dummy blog post that I've set up on the WordPress website, so this is the home page with a couple of sample posts, and if we click the New Heights blog post and we scroll down, we can see the username Peter. So if we just move this window slightly to the right, that name Peter comes from the display name publicly as Peter, set up in the dashboard. So we can see that if you had named Peter admin instead and blogged using that account, then this would be advertised on your blog posts. And as this is an automatically created account with administrator privileges, that could then become a targeted account. Now, I realize that you can change the display name. So if we go back to our WordPress dashboard here, we could have a username called admin, but have it displayed as Bob, for example, or Peter. While this obscures the admin account, I would go one step further and create a separate user account for creating content while using the administrator account specifically for performing admin tasks. And we'll cover this in more detail later. So let's run through the different WordPress user roles available that we can assign. For completeness, I'm showing the super admin account, but this is only available if you have a multi-site WordPress installation. Since this course is focused on single site installations, you won't see this account available, but again, I'm just showing it for completeness. Then we have our standard administrator account, and this is a single site administrator that has full privileges across your whole WordPress installation. Then we have an editor who can publish and manage posts and includes the posts of other users as well. An author is somebody who can publish and manage their own posts. Then a contributor is somebody who can write and manage their own posts but cannot publish them. And lastly, a subscriber is somebody who can only manage their profile. So now let's see how we can assign these roles to users in the WordPress dashboard. We're in the WordPress dashboard and we're going to run through how to set up a new user and assign the appropriate role that we discussed in the previous lecture. So again, on the left hand side we have the users menu. We simply click that and then we click add new at the top. This is the username and we'll just call this my name, David. I'll enter an email address. And I'll put my first name and last name. I'll accept that strong alphanumeric character. And the last section is the role and the drop-down box. And as we discussed in the previous lecture, the different user roles, I will set myself up as an editor. Click add new. And there's my user account with the editor role assigned. Now if I go into my user account, you can see the username David that was set up, the editor role, my first and last name, a nickname, and then a display name publicly as. And if we drop that down, we can see the different combinations that when we create a blog post, that the display name will show as one of these. So I'll just have my first name listed as my display name. We go down to the bottom of the page and click update user. Now if I log out of the dashboard, because I'm currently logged in as Peter, but if I just currently log out and log back in as myself, David, I'm now logged in as an editor. So I'm going to create a new post. Go to posts, add new. I'm just going to call it editor post. And then I'm going to just paste some sample text. We're going to publish the post. And then we're going to go to a web browser, and there's our editor post. And there's my display name, which I renamed from David Wyatt just to David. So that just goes to show how the display names and username creation relates to how it is displayed on a blog post on your WordPress website. In this lecture, I'm going to explain the difference between administration and content curation of your WordPress website. Curation being the general creation and ongoing management of content. Most, if not all, activity on your WordPress website will fall into one of these two categories, administration or content curation. And it's important to learn which tasks you are performing so you can use the appropriate user account with the appropriate user role to perform those tasks. This is generally known as role-based access control, or RBAC for short. Administration tasks would include the following common activities: installing or modifying themes, installing or removing plugins, changing site settings such as permalinks or time zone of your WordPress website, viewing security logs, and managing backup or restore jobs as part of general administration. Content curation, on the other hand, would include typical tasks such as adding blog posts or editing existing blog posts, adding or removing media such as uploading images or podcasts, MP3s, and approving visitor comments. So if we return to a WordPress user role slide we had in one of the earlier lectures, you may remember this, I would recommend setting up an administrator account, which will be the first account that you set up when you create a WordPress website, as the administrator account for performing the administrator tasks, and then create possibly the editor account, which will be able to publish and manage posts, including the posts of other users, to perform your content curation tasks. So I hope that provided a bit of clarity over what role-based access control to add another layer of security to your WordPress website. So in summary, and to reinforce, avoid publishing content using your admin account or administrator account. Use your editor account for this. By not publishing your admin account name, you're not advertising to the world the username or display name of an administrative account which could be targeted. Again, I do realize that you can change the display name of an admin account, but by removing it altogether, you are obscuring completely any possible account that could have administrative privileges. Again, this comes back to the onion analogy and the layering of security. If an editor account is compromised, then the damage that can be caused will be limited to the scope of what that editor account is granted to do, which is mainly around content creation. What they won't be able to do is log into your dashboard and start changing themes, plugins, or PHP code, which can cause a lot more damage. I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you. In the next series of lectures, we're going to cover hardening our WordPress installation and continue to add layers of security. So the topics we'll be covering will include secure the WordPress login and session over the secure sockets layer, or commonly known as SSL, and this gives us the HTTPS that you see in your web browser. The purpose of this is to encrypt the login and the ongoing web session over SSL, and this is good to have, particularly if you want to work in a public area over a publicly accessible Wi-Fi network such as a coffee shop. By not encrypting your login over SSL, a hacker could sniff the wireless network traffic and easily identify the username and password while you log in. Encrypting the login makes it a lot harder, if not impossible, for a hacker to identify this critically sensitive information. So this is a good setting to have. As we'll be applying this to the test WordPress website that I'm using to create this course with, you'll see in future lectures that all login and dashboard sessions will be encrypted over the SSL connection protocol. The next topic we'll be covering is adding the Google CAPTCHA to WordPress login. And this is really aimed at preventing spam and blocking those time-wasting idiot bots from attacking our WordPress website. Then we'll be installing and configuring the brilliant WordFence plugin, and we'll see more of this in the later lecture. And lastly, we'll be disabling file editing, which will prevent the ability to modify PHP and other code files within the WordPress dashboard. So with that, let's get started with securing our WordPress login and session over SSL. Before we get into this lecture, I just wanted to highlight that you will need an SSL certificate installed on your WordPress website in order to support SSL and HTTPS to encrypt network traffic. Hosting providers offer different SSL options, and typically you can order an SSL certificate from your account portal directly that's on your hosting provider account. SSL certificates are fairly inexpensive, and they can cost around the $20 mark for a certificate that is matched to your domain name. Some hosting providers include the use of a shared SSL certificate as part of their hosting plans, which for the purpose of encrypting the login and session is perfectly fine. Because the ordering of SSL certificates varies between hosting providers, if you're still unsure about how to go about this, simply contact your hosting provider support team, tell them you're interested in ordering an SSL certificate, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. Now, once the SSL certificate has been installed, you'll need to edit the wp-config.php file to force login and session over HTTPS. And as we mentioned in the previous lecture, the benefit of this is that login names and passwords are encrypted, as well as the subsequent web browsing session into your WordPress dashboard. So let's go ahead and edit the wp-config.php file and configure secure login and session. So we go up to, I'm in the cPanel at the moment, and we go to the file manager, and we'll accept the document root for my test domain name. And in the root of the WordPress website, you'll see a wp-config.php file. And I'll go to the top and click the code editor function, accept the defaults here. And if we scroll down, this may be familiar if we quickly glance at some of the settings here where we defined earlier the database names, passwords, the salts. This is the same file again. And just before the line that says "that's all, stop editing, happy blogging," I'm just going to place a couple of carriage returns in there and paste the setting define force SSL admin true into this file. So that's all we need to do. I then go back up to the top and click save. Close down the file. Okay, so now we'll quickly run a test and ensure that our login is encrypted. So I'll just open a new tab on my web browser. I shall just browse to the domain name. And as we can see on the browser URL that it's been forced to the HTTPS protocol. I'll just pop in my username and password. I'll be logging in as my administrator account. And then we can now see that if I just browse around different elements of the WordPress dashboard, we can still see that the HTTPS is still forced. And this is what's called the session part of the encryption. So we've logged in and the username and password's been encrypted. Now the ongoing session that we're in this web browser is still within HTTPS, so fully encrypted from end to end. It's a great security practice to put in place. I hope that this makes sense. If you have any questions, please add to the discussion. I'll be happy to answer, and I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to cover adding Google Capture to our login page. What does CAPTCHA stand for? Well, as you can see, completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. Wow, that was a mouthful. But what does CAPTCHA do? Well, it's designed to protect websites from spam and weed out genuine human visitors from malicious bots and abusive scripts. You may have seen this technology at work already when logging into other websites where you see a box to type in some form of distorted text consisting of letters and numbers. However, advancements in bot intelligence is proving increasingly ineffective. So Google's response to this challenge has been to develop a new CAPTCHA-like system where a human just needs to tick a box. Simple and effective. So let's add this to our WordPress login page. So we're going to add the Google Capture to our WordPress login page. And we're in our dashboard here. And as you can see, we're running over the HTTPS secure protocol. We're going to go to Plugins, Add New. And in the Search Plugins field, we're just going to type Google Capture. And the plugin that we're specifically after is Google Capture by Best Web Soft. So we click Install Now. Just wait for the installation to unpack and install. And it's successfully installed. We'll then click Activate Plugin. And then we go down to Settings. Before we can add the Google Capture to our WordPress login, we need to get hold of a site key and a secret key from the Google Capture service. Under the authentication title, you'll see a before you're able to do something, you must register here link. So we'll click that link and that'll take us off to the Google's reCAPTCHA service. And we just need to log in with a Google account. I'm going to add my test account here. Enter my password. And we'll click the Get reCAPTCHA button at the top. So I don't have any sites currently registered. We're going to register my wptesthost.com web address. So I'm just going to enter that into the label. And I will add the domain name. And I'll also add my email address here to be notified for any alerts. I then click register, and it's now generated my site key and my secret key. So what we'll do is we'll copy and paste the site key and the secret keys back in the plugin on our WordPress dashboard. So that's the site key, and we'll copy the secret key and paste that into those fields there. If we scroll down, the options available in the free version of this plugin for enabling reCAPTCHA for login forms, registration, reset password and the comments form. We're primarily interested in the login form, but I'll leave them ticked as default for the rest of the forms. There are some other options here that you can choose depending on your requirements. We'll stick with version 2, the light theme, and if you want to upgrade to the pro version, you can get support for other reCAPTCHA languages. You can change the size and also have it integrated with the Contact Form 7 plugin. But we're just going to leave the defaults and click Save Changes. If we log out of our WordPress dashboard now, we'll then see the Google reCAPTCHA on the login page. So I'm just going to enter my username and my password. Now if I don't tick that box and I click login, I get an error. You've entered an incorrect captcha value. So this is good at deterring the automated bots, as they won't be able to get past this stage. Now if I do tick the box this time, I don't need to read any distorted text. It's as simple as checking the box, I'm not a robot, click login, and I'm in my dashboard. So quite a quick, simple way to add another layer of security on your WordPress login. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Limiting the installation of plugins is generally a good security practice. However, there are times when plugins are needed and warranted. For security, I find the security plugin called WordFence offers so much value. The plugin has both a free and a paid version, but for the features of the free version, it offers fantastic protection, especially when combined with the other security measures you're learning in this course. And it goes a long way in offering a high level of protection for your WordPress website. If we visit the WordFence website, as we are here, you'll see a features link, which I encourage you to review. And if it scrolls down, it'll cover the 5 main components of the security areas it covers: scanning, detecting, protecting, blocking, and repairing. But what I want to show you are the features that you get for the free version. And if you scroll down a little further, you'll see a Compare Our Plans button. And if you tick that, have a scroll down, and you'll see all the list of features that both editions provide. And as you can see, the free version on the right hand column offers the majority of the features. Now, while the free version does offer a great level of protection, if you want to install the paid version, then go ahead. I'm certainly not going to stop you if you require the additional features. But for those who are looking for a more economical way to protect their WordPress website, this free version is simply fantastic. So as you can see, other than the enhanced scanning features, spam protection and cell phone sign-in, and premium support, most of the features are included in the free version. So let's switch back to our WordPress dashboard now and go ahead and install and configure the WordFence plugin. So we'll go back to the login page of our website here that we're using, and I'll log in as Peter, who is the designated administrator for the website. I'm just an editor, and we'll pop the password in there and we'll tick our reCAPTCHA box. We'll click login, and we're logged in as the administrator. So similar to the installation of the Google Capture plugin, we'll go to plugins on the left, click add new plugin, and if we scroll over to the right hand side, we'll enter WordFence. And this is the WordFence Security by WordFence plugin. Click install now. We'll just wait for the package to download and extract and install. And it's been installed successfully. So we'll click activate plugin. And whether you want to enter your email for alerts, I've actually entered my personal email address to get alerts, which I find very, very useful. So go ahead and stick your email in that field and you'll be notified as soon as WordFence have any important notifications to send out. So on the left hand pane at the bottom, we'll see a WordFence main menu. If we click that once, so the WordFence submenu offers quite a few options, mainly for monitoring and checking audits and logs for the state of your WordFence plugin. The main submenu I want to draw your attention to is the options. So if you click that, and we can see a whole raft of options and tick boxes that we can go through. I won't go through every single one. There's a little information button by each one that you can browse more details of, and out of the box this offers fantastic protection. But the main areas that we need to look at is where to email alerts, and this is the destination email address where the WordFence plugin will email security alerts. So I'm just going to add my administrator account email address in this field. So level 2 medium protection, suitable for most sites. I don't tend to change that very much. The next section to focus on are the login security options, and we'll leave false admins and publishers to use strong passwords as is, which is recommended. But these next two settings, lockout after how many login failures and lockout after how many forgot password attempts, 20 is just simply way too high. I think if anything is trying to go beyond 10, that would certainly be raising the suspicion flags. But I like to bring that down even lower, a little bit more aggressive, to between 3 and 5. So I shall choose 5 for this site. I do mistype my passwords occasionally. Anything more than 5 and I'd want it locked out. And then you can then determine how long the lockout period is. I'll leave 5 minutes as is. The other setting I wanted to draw your attention to was the hide WordPress version, which is already ticked. And this saves you having to edit your functions.php file and adding the generator meta tag setting to hide your WordPress version. So out of the box, this plugin takes care of that for you already. And we'll just go to the bottom of the page now and click Save Changes on the settings that we've changed. Now, as this is a reasonably fresh WordPress website, we won't see much activity. One of the main submenu options to also keep an eye on is the live traffic, and this is a fantastic feature of this website. In fact, there we go. I've just had one hit me now. So from Beijing in China, to try to access a non-existent page. So it's appended pages/services right this minute as we speak. Over time, you'll see reams and reams of multiple access attempts to either non-existent URLs or usernames that don't exist, and fake admin login attempts. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lecture. If you have any questions, please add to the discussion, and I'll see you in the next lecture. The aim of a WordPress hack is to inject it with malware, include links to phishing websites, or include links for black hat SEO. To do so, a malicious hacker first launches a brute force attack against a WordPress website, and once they guess the password of the WordPress administrator account, they log into the WordPress dashboard, from where they can use the theme and plugin editors to access and modify the files of the activated theme and plugins. Now, by default, WordPress allows users with the administrator role assigned the ability to edit PHP files of plugins and themes inside of the WordPress dashboard. This is often the first thing an attacker would look for if they manage to gain access to an administrative account, as this functionality allows modification of files and code execution on the server. Now, given the security measures we've already employed during this course, we hope that this won't happen. By disabling file editing, you are adding a further layer of security between the WordPress source code and the malicious hacker, making it impossible for the attacker to modify any WordPress code directly from the WordPress dashboard. Now, to disable file editing, we will need to edit the wp-config.php file on our website. For this, we will use the inbuilt file editor that is available in the File Manager utility on our cPanel. And again, this is the simplest and securest method to edit and save an existing file on our site. But before we do, let's look at where in the dashboard we edit themes and plugins so we can compare the before and after effect of this change. So we're in the dashboard of our WordPress website, and I'm going to show you the two places that as an administrator you'll have the ability to edit files within the dashboard. But just before we do, incidentally, I just looked at the word fence part of the dashboard and I can see that it's been busy already. It's already blocked an IP address by the looks of things from Russia, and when I delved a bit deeper, it showed that the username host was being attempted to log in 4 times in this case before WordFence blocked it. I don't have a username called host on this site, so this address from Russia was trying to log in with a username that doesn't exist, and WordFence has blocked that. So that's great. So let's move back to disabling file editing. There are 2 places within the dashboard this can be made. One is on the appearance, and as we can see on the menu there is an editor submenu. If we click that, this then brings us to the different template files and PHP files that comprise this theme that I have activated, which is the default WordPress 2015 theme. And if we choose one of the PHP files, for example, the common theme functions.php, this is the contents, the code within the PHP file itself. And this is exactly where a compromised administrator account will come into here and manipulate, modify, edit the code and inject some malicious scripts in here which we want to block. The second area where you can edit files is within the plugins. If we go down to plugins, and again you see another editor submenu, and again this is the Google Capture plugin that we installed earlier, and this is the PHP code of the plugin, or some of the PHP code of the plugin. There's several PHP files that comprise the plugin. We're just looking at one of them here, and again this is another area that could be targeted by a compromised administrator account, that if you don't disable file editing, the administrator could, or a hacked administrator account could come into here and directly edit the code from within the dashboard. So that's what the default setting is. Let's move on to disabling file editing so we can compare the before and after effect. So we're in the cPanel of our hosting provider, and as we did before when we edited the wp-config file, we'll head straight back to the File Manager utility, and again we'll open it for the document root. We'll locate the wp-config.php file again, go to the top menu and click Code Editor. Accept the defaults and click Edit. If you remember, this is where we set the SSL, force the SSL admin setting to true. I'm going to put 2 carriage returns in again, and paste the setting that disallows file editing. I'll add this in the resources section of this lecture so that you can copy and paste that easily into your wp-config.php file. So once we've added the file setting, we'll go up to save. And we'll close the file down. So now we've disabled file editing, we'll see what effect this does within the dashboard. So you'll have to log out and log back in again as your administrator account into your dashboard, which I've done. And when we go back to the appearance and plugin menus, we can see that the editor submenu has been removed completely. And similar under plugins. If this was a compromised administrator account, I can't see the editor option to go in and start injecting malicious code. So this is a good security practice to make. If you do need to modify or edit PHP files within the dashboard, then you can temporarily re-enable file editing. But for the best part of your WordPress website, I would leave this disabled. Hope that makes sense and look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. Thank you. Welcome to this section, Unlock the Power of htaccess. Wanted to run through a quick introduction on the topics we'll be covering. First, what is the htaccess file? What's in it and how it works? Then we'll walk through the student htaccess template file. This is an htaccess file that I've personally developed over time, and it's a great supplement when used in conjunction with all of the other security measures covered in this course. Then we'll finish off by securely uploading your htaccess file to the correct location on your web server. So with that, I'll see you in the next lecture where we'll dive into explaining what is the htaccess file and how it works. So what is the .htaccess file? Well, it's short for hypertext access. It's a powerful configuration file used by the Apache web server, and it contains commands known as directives. And it's a plain text file, so it can be used with your favorite text editor or the text editor within your cPanel. And it's compatible with alternative web server technologies such as Lightspeed, which is becoming an increasingly popular web server technology with web hosting companies. I do want to highlight though that the htaccess file is not compatible with the Nginx web server, or Nginx. So check with your hosting provider which web server technology they're using. Chances are today they will be using Apache or Lightspeed, and you'll be good to go. So htaccess can control a multitude of settings on your web server. Typical uses include authorization rules, authentication, rewriting URLs, controlling directory listings, control file types and file sizes, and customizing error responses. htaccess files are read on every request. Important point I wanted to make here is that htaccess files are processed by your server first before any other code on your website. htaccess directives can stop malicious scripts before they reach the PHP code in WordPress. Changes take effect immediately, so if you do edit your htaccess file and save it, the change takes effect there and then. No web server restarts or services need to be restarted. As we discussed, the majority of web hosting companies support htaccess files, mainly the Apache and Lightspeed. But be careful when editing the htaccess file. It's one of the most temperamental files you'll encounter when using WordPress. It only takes one character to be out of place for the code to be incorrect, and when that happens, it can cause your website to become unavailable. So I recommend that when you want to edit your htaccess file, take a backup of it, a working version of it, store it in a safe place on your computer, and if possible in another location, such as a USB flash drive or even on some cloud storage. Whenever you update your htaccess file on your server, refresh your website to see if it's still working. So don't skip this step, as it's vital that you verify your website is still working correctly. If your website doesn't respond or returns an error, just revert back to your backed up copy of the htaccess file by uploading it over the version causing the errors. So I hope you enjoyed this quick introduction to the htaccess file and understand how powerful it is. I'll see you in the next lecture. I wanted to add this quick lecture as if you've been working with WordPress for a while and have changed your site's permalink structure, then you've actually modified an htaccess file indirectly via the WordPress dashboard. Let me show you what I mean. So we're in our file manager here of our WordPress website, and we're just looking at the root of it, the public_HTML directory, and there's an .htaccess file already in there. And this has been automatically created by WordPress after the installation. If we quickly view that, just go up to the top menu bar and click View. It's not very exciting, it's pretty empty. We've just got an opening and closing WordPress comment ready for any directives that, depending on what you set in your dashboard, will be entered between these comment lines. If we go to our WordPress dashboard now and go to Settings, Permalinks, we see we have the default set, which is very un-SEO. If we choose something a bit more common like the post name, which improves our SEO, not as effective as it once used to be, but it certainly helps, and we click Save Changes. If we go back to our htaccess file, just reopen that file again, go back to View, and then we can see WordPress, because we've changed our permalink settings, has added a mod rewrite directive to rewrite the post name to match the WordPress slug, and the slug being the name of your sample post in this case. So I just wanted to add that there so that you can see at a very early stage how the htaccess file is leveraged. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Before we step through the htaccess template, if you've chosen to use the Atom text editor, I like to install the htaccess style sheet that adds a bit of colour around some htaccess commands and makes it easier to view. The Atom text editor is an open source text editor and has quite a large community that adds packages, enhancements and other features. So let's go ahead and add the htaccess style sheet. If we go up to the File menu and click Settings, if you scroll down to the Install submenu, and in the search field just type htaccess, we'll see the first package returned is language-htaccess. If we just go to the Install button and click that, once that's installed, we can change back to our htaccess file, and we can immediately see some nice color accents that are placed on the htaccess commands. Again, it just makes it a little bit easier to view on the eye. So that's it. Let's step through the htaccess file in the next lecture. So before we get stuck into the template file, I just wanted to give you a quick note on the structure of the file itself. I've added a brief description of each security setting as a comment, which has the hash symbol at the beginning of each line. So you can see here I have a description and each line begins with a hash. This is commenting out any statement so it won't be processed. So feel free to add any additional comments to your own htaccess file that you'll find will assist you for reference purposes. So the first setting is protecting the wp-config.php file. So this setting uses a directive to protect the file from being accessed remotely from the internet. If you remember, the wp-config.php file contains important site configuration details such as the WordPress database name, the WordPress username that will connect to the database, the salt and authentication keys and other settings. So quite a sensitive file we need to protect. We'll also apply the order allowed denied directive to the htaccess file itself. And I've also included some case sensitivity as well, so regardless of how the htaccess file is named, you can actually have the htaccess file in all uppercase, but normally it's in lowercase. Regardless, anything with htaccess or hta as the beginning of a file after a dot will be protected. This directive is used to protect specific file types from being accessed, so add your own file types if needed. I've gone for ini, log and sh or shell files. It's very, very rare that any user would need to view these or run these files remotely, so I'm locking this down so that only the web server itself can directly access these files, typically through either the dashboard or a plugin, but certainly not from across the internet. So we're disabling directory listing or browsing. So by default, the Apache Lightspeed or Lightspeed displays the contents of directories that don't include an index file, such as an index.php or an index.html, for example. Some web hosts disable this index viewing as an added security measure, but there is a way to force it through the options all-indexes. I'll quickly show you what that means. If we switched back to our WordPress website, and here we're just in the file manager in the root of our web server, I'm going to create a new folder and I'll just call it Browse. Browse Me. So we've created a new folder under the root called Browse Me. We'll go into that directory and I'll just create a new file in there. Just call it hello.txt. Just going to quickly add some sample text to it. And then we'll just save that file very quickly. Close that down. So we've got a hello.txt file in a folder called Browse Me, but there's no index.php or index.html file in there. So if we go to our web browser and browse to that directory, this is the directory listing that occurs by default because we don't have an index file in this directory. If we switch back to our Atom text editor, and I'll just copy this line, we're just going to add it straight into my default htaccess file running on my web server now, so it won't have all of these settings right now, but we'll just copy and paste this into my htaccess file as it sits at the moment. So I'm just going to go up to the code editor and I'm just going to add, before the begin WordPress line, just that. So I've pasted the options all-indexes. I'll save this file, and if I quickly go back to the Browse Me and refresh that, we get a nice 403 forbidden. The next setting is we're disabling the web server signature. So this directive prevents sensitive server details being displayed in server generated documents. The less information we give away to the World Wide Web, the better. So if any errors do occur, we don't reveal any specifics around the server or its build number to a potential hacker. If we go to the next setting, we have hide PHP errors from visitors. So this setting prevents PHP errors from being displayed publicly on your website. It eliminates a potential security risk and won't confuse your visitors with strings of confusing PHP errors. So we've got an if module. If the module mod_php5 is loaded by Apache or Lightspeed, and then it will disable the error flags. The next section is quite a useful one. It limits the size of file uploads. So this method protects your site against denial of service, DOS, denial of service attacks by limiting the size of file uploads. Here we're limiting it to 2 megabytes. File sizes are expressed in bytes. Again, this is only useful if you allow users to upload files to your site, again depending on the purpose of your WordPress website, and if you have specific limits that you want to place, just put a limit request body and then the number of bytes. So in this case it's 2 megabytes. I've just added a useful table here, so feel free to add any increments in between. We've got from 2 to 100 megabytes. And then we finish off on the opening and closing WordPress section that's automatically generated. So we don't touch this. This is something we need to leave in our htaccess file. I've put all of our custom settings preceding this, and then the begin WordPress section right at the end. So we make sure that we leave this section in that's created by WordPress automatically. Well, I hope that you found this useful, and again, adding multiple layers of security to your WordPress website in conjunction with the plugins and other settings, we're really getting belt and braces here at protecting our site. Hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next lecture. The second htaccess file we're going to look at is for specifically protecting the uploads folder. The previous htaccess file is what we could call the core htaccess file, and this sits in the root of your web server. This specific htaccess file is going to be copied to the wp-content uploads folder and controls the allowed file types. So what we're going to do here is only allow media files to be accessed from the internet. So the WordPress uploads folder should be used to serve media files. Since this folder is where all the uploaded content will be stored, it is possible that a rogue or malicious script could be placed inside this folder and possibly executed, depending on the permissions on that directory. So we'll add this to the htaccess file and place it inside specifically the wp-content uploads directory. As you can see, I've listed some extensions of typical media files: JPEGs, TIFFs, some movie files, TIFF files, zip files. Add and remove the file extensions that are required by your website until you've reached a list of file types that you're happy with. Just for your information, all htaccess files will be made available in the bonus section at the end of this course. Just to demonstrate the impact or effect of this htaccess file for controlling uploads, we're just going to switch to a demo. So as we can just see, these extensions here don't include the txt extension. So what I'm going to do is create a rogue.txt file and upload it to our uploads folder, and then try and access it from the internet. So we're in the file manager of our web hosting provider, and I've gone to my web root, and we're going to create a new file in the wp-content uploads directory. So I'm going to call it rogue.txt, and I'll just add some sample text in there. This is a rogue text file, if ever there can be one. We'll just save that. And now we've got a rogue.txt file with some sample text in there. So if we try and access that now from the internet, we can see we can access that file. So what we'll do now is we will go back to our file manager, and we'll upload our htaccess file. So make sure I've got the right one. This is the uploads file, the uploads htaccess file. We'll go into more detail about how and where we upload, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Let's close that down now. If we go back to our URL, and now we've got a 403 forbidden. So because the txt file is not permitted in the list of file extensions just for the uploads directory, that's why we get this file. If I go back to the htaccess file that we've uploaded to the uploads directory and add the txt file, so I'm just going to click the edit button, and I shall add txt to the list of extensions, come across, click save, come back to my web browser, refresh, and now I'm able to access that file. So again, because we've put the htaccess file directly into the uploads directory, it applies to any files in this directory and any subdirectories. So if the rogue.txt file was in the 2015 directory and we had the htaccess file in the root of uploads and we uploaded a rogue.txt file, htaccess would also block it in this directory too if it didn't have txt as a permitted extension. So remember, htaccess files can be copied in any directory and they will apply to that directory and any subdirectories that match the directives in this htaccess file. In this case, we're just blocking file extensions. Hope that's been useful and allowed you to see the effect of controlling file types in the uploads folder. We're now going to step through uploading the htaccess files to our web host. Our core htaccess file will be uploaded to the website root directory, commonly under the public_html directory. And then the htaccess file that protects our WordPress uploads directory to specific file types will be uploaded to the wp-content/uploads directory. So we've got our two htaccess files. They both go in those two separate locations. So let's take a look how to do this from the File Manager utility on our cPanel. So I've got a local folder structure on my PC here that represents my website on the internet. I've just called a folder public_html to represent my website root directory. If I double click into that, this is where the core htaccess file is. And then I've just created a subfolder called uploads, where the second htaccess file that protects the uploads folder on our WordPress site from certain file types. So these two htaccess files is what we're going to upload. So we go to our File Manager utility again on cPanel, open this up to our document root. So in our document root here, we've already got an htaccess file that we have been editing during this course. But like I recommended to always take a backup of a file before we overwrite it, I'll just highlight the htaccess file, go up to the top menu and click rename, and I'll just append _backup. That means that we can easily revert to this working htaccess file that we know is working if we have any issues. So that's successfully renamed it. We then go up to the top menu and click upload. Click choose file, and on my local folder on my system, go to public_html that represents my web root on my PC, and I just highlight the htaccess file there and wait for that to upload. Go back to my file manager, refresh the page, and there's our live working newer htaccess file. We'll also do the same to the WordPress uploads folder that we discussed earlier. If I drop down public_html, go to wp-contents and put the focus on uploads. At the moment it's empty. And if we go again to the top menu, click upload, and we'll choose the file. Again, from my local system, I've created an upload subfolder and the other htaccess file is there. So we'll click open again, wait for the file to upload, it's only a few bytes. Go back to our file manager, refresh the page, and there's our htaccess file. If we quickly go inside that file, we can see this is just the file that we are using to control file extensions, as you saw previously. Hope that's explained where to copy the htaccess files to. I'll see you in the next lecture. In this section, we'll cover backup and recovery of your WordPress website. The main topics I'll be discussing include why back up your website. This may sound obvious, but there are several scenarios where a backup of your site can help. I'll also explain why you need to own your own backups rather than your hosting provider. Then we'll cover what files comprise WordPress, You need to know what items make up a WordPress website so you know what to back up. We'll cover this in that lecture. Then we'll run through a backup plugin install and configure, and then an oh no moment where we'll do a restore demo, simulating a scenario where we need to restore from a backup to get us back to a point in time of a working website. So let's get started with why back up your website in the next lecture. Backups tend to be one of those tasks that we recognize as being important, but either never get around to doing it or it just falls off to the wayside completely. Only after an event that causes data loss do you put into place a backup solution to avoid having to go through that exercise again. So why back up your website? Well, it enables you to recover from hacking and malicious bot attacks, two typical cases where an attack leaves your website defaced or inoperable completely. Site owner error. Yes, even as administrators, we can be prone to error. We could actually delete a posting or maybe incorrectly edit some PHP code. Whatever the case, a backup can be used to extract any files and restore them over the top of the file in question. Failed plugin or theme updates. If you experience issues with your site after performing an installation or update to a plugin, theme, or even the WordPress core itself, taking a backup of a known working state of your site prior to performing updates or upgrades provides a good rollback point if required. And also, backups can be useful when we want to migrate hosting providers. It's possible you might want to change web hosting providers, or even worse, maybe your hosting provider shuts down or folds with little to no notice, taking your site down in the process. Again, a recent backup allows you to restore your website to another hosting provider, and with some simple name server changes with your domain registrar, your website is back up and running again. Don't assume that your hosting provider does backups for you. Are you really sure that your hosting provider makes regular backups of your site? How often do they back up your site? And how can they be restored? And how long does it take to restore? If you don't hold your backups, then you don't control it. So, more importantly, do you want to leave the safety of your site solely in the hands of your hosting company? Bottom line, own your backups. Take control of when backups occur, how frequently they're taken, and where they're stored. I'll see you in the next lecture. Your WordPress site consists of the following items: the WordPress core installation that consists of the files and directories, usually located in your web root directory, for example the /public_HTML that we've seen in our test host. WordPress plugins, WordPress themes, images and files, and the images can come from users or yourself uploading images to the uploads folder that we've now protected, PHP and other code files, and the WordPress database. Hope that's been useful, and I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to install a backup plugin that I use and find works very well with WordPress. As you can see from the web page I've opened up here, it's called Updraft Plus, and you can visit updraftplus.com for more details. So similar to the WordFence plugin, there's both a paid and a free version. I'm going to show you how to install and configure the free version to make this as economical as possible for you. If I scroll down the home page here, what I like about Updraft Plus are the multiple remote storage options that you can configure as backup destinations. By default, Updraft Plus creates backups and stores them locally on your WordPress website. This is fine for quick, immediate and convenient restores that might need to be performed. But you should also have an offsite backup so that you have a second copy stored in case your hosting provider closes down or you have issues accessing the default backup stored on your site. Either way, a second backup sent to a remote storage is generally good practice. Now if I switch to the comparison page for the free and the premium versions, so as you can see on this page, we've got on the left hand column the Updraft Plus free version and on the right hand side the premium version features. But I wanted to highlight to you that for the free version out the box you get the capability to back up to Dropbox, Google Drive and Amazon S3 cloud storage providers, and also, as you can see, you can back up to email too. If you want to back up to Microsoft OneDrive, for example, then you'll need to pay for the premium version. I'd also recommend that if you stick with the free version, you don't use FTP because that's unencrypted. And if you want to use FTP or secure FTP or secure copy, then again I recommend that you do upgrade to the premium version if that's your preferred backup method. But I suggest starting with Dropbox, Google Drive or S3, where the connection will be encrypted by default if you choose these as backup destinations. Let's quickly dive to their FAQ, their frequently asked question, and just call out this paragraph here on what exactly does Updraft Plus back up. So they say essentially everything. It backs up your database and all WordPress content, which means your uploads, plugins, themes and additional files created by plugins. The free version does not back up WordPress itself, since you can always obtain this again from wordpress.org. Updraft Plus Premium has an option to include this too for convenience, plus any files anywhere else on your server, i.e. non-WordPress, that you want to back up for good measure too. So what does this mean? Well, if you want to stick with the free version and make this as economical as possible, then you'll just have to perform 1 or 2 additional steps. If you need to do a full restore of WordPress, then you'll need to get the core from wordpress.org, install a fresh WordPress website, then install the Updraft Plus free backup plugin and restore the latest backup that you took, and then restore the latest copy of your wp-config.php file, which is the only file in the WordPress core that we modify. And if you remember, this contained the database connection settings, the username that connects to the database, the salt and authentication keys, and forcing of the SSL connection. So that's the only file that we change in the core, and you need to take a backup of that. But once this file is configured, it's unlikely that it needs to change very often. So once you do take a copy of it, it shouldn't change very often in the future unless you add additional settings, in which case then just take a backup of the wp-config.php file. So just to recap very quickly, if you need to do a restore, you need the latest WordPress core install that you get from wordpress.org, your latest copy of the wp-config.php file, and your latest Updraft Plus backups. Those 3 will get your site back up and running to a known good configuration. I'll summarize these steps in a slide at the end of this section. So that's an intro to this backup plugin. Let's head back to our WordPress dashboard where we'll install and configure Updraft Plus. In this lecture, we're going to install and configure the Updraft Plus backup plugin. So to do that, we're at our dashboard here on our WordPress website, and we'll just go across to the plugins menu and go down to add new. We go to the right hand field where it says search plugins. We'll just type Updraft Plus. And the first result should be the Updraft Plus backup and restoration plugin. Just simply click install now. We'll just wait for the unpackaging and installation of the plugin. And that's successfully installed the plugin. Now we just activate the plugin. Click activate plugin link. The plugin's now activated, and if we go down to settings, you'll see a new submenu option called Updraft Plus Backups. If you click that, we'll then get into the configuration options now. So now that Updraft Plus has been installed, there are a couple of settings we need to configure. Before we jump into that, let's just quickly run through the first tab that you can see here, the current status tab, which is just the main dashboard of the plugin. Here you can click the Backup Now button to start a manual backup job if you wish. You can also set schedule backups, which we'll look into in a minute, but as I said, this Backup Now button can be used to quickly take a backup manually. The Restore button, no surprises, no guesses here, is to perform restores, and there's also a Clone and Migrate button too. This goes into more advanced backup and recovery methods and also requires a premium license. Then we just have a quick summary on the next scheduled backups of when the next scheduled backup is due to take place. We haven't configured anything yet, so there's nothing currently scheduled. We have a when the last backup job was run, and also a link to a log file which stores messages. So let's go and configure the settings I mentioned earlier. We'll just come up to the settings tab and we'll see two options here, the file and database backup intervals. Now I can't recommend what settings to put in here for your website. Every website is different, it has different purposes, has content that's more dynamic or more static. In addition, the number of backups that are retained will also depend on how far back you want to go, if you need to restore, and how much storage each backup takes. To give you an example of what I do for some of my websites that I may add content to maybe once or twice a week, I'll set up a weekly backup schedule and keep 2 weeks worth of backups retained. I also keep the file and the database backups the same at the same interval to ensure a point in time consistent backup. So let's go and configure that now. So there's quite a few increments and intervals you can choose. So I will choose weekly for the file and weekly for the database, and I'll leave 2 and 2 for 2 backups of each to be retained, and they'll just cycle through over time. This takes us back to the FAQ on the previous lecture, where we looked at what files exactly the free plugin backs up, and it includes the WordPress plugins, the themes and uploads. It excludes backing up previous backups, which makes sense just to save space, and any other directories found inside the WP content will be backed up. But the other setting I wanted to draw your attention to was just the reporting, and I tick this box which has a basic backup report sent to your site's admin address, and it gives you the current admin address in brackets there. And if we click that link, it takes you to the place in your WordPress site where you configure that. That's the email address there under settings, general email address, and that's your site's admin address. So we'll just go back down to Updraft Plus backups, settings. So I'll retick that box because I didn't save the changes before, and that's all I need to do there. So go to the bottom, click Save Changes, and that's the configuration done. So just have a think on what interval you want to back up your files and databases, and enable the email reporting feature. In this lecture, we're going to connect our Updraft Plus backup to a remote storage provider. I'm going to use Dropbox for purposes of demonstration, but you can choose from the many options available we've already discussed. So let's go ahead and connect Updraft to Dropbox. So again, we're in our main dashboard here, and we'll just go to Settings, Updraft Plus Backups. And if you go to the Settings tab, and further down the page you'll see choose your remote storage, and at the moment it says none. Just a quick note to highlight, if you choose no remote storage, then backups remain on the web server. This is not recommended unless you plan to manually copy them to your computer, as losing the web server would mean losing both your website and the backups in one event. And this is a point that we've already covered in earlier lectures. So let's drop this box down and choose Dropbox. So we'll just read this through just to clarify. Dropbox is a great choice because Updraft Plus supports chunked uploads. No matter how big your site is, Updraft Plus can upload a little at a time and not get thwarted by timeout. So that's a good setting there. And then it says, good news, your site's communication with Dropbox can be encrypted. If you see any errors to do with encryption, then look in the expert settings for more help. So coming back again to, by using a cloud provider such as Dropbox, your backups are encrypted in transit. Need to use subfolders? Backups are saved in Apps Updraft Plus. So just to quickly show you the contents of my current Dropbox folder, we can then look at the before and after folder structure that after a backup is created by Updraft Plus remotely, how that reflects in Dropbox. So I'm just going to go to the top here, and I'm just in my Dropbox folder location, and I've just got a couple of folders there, docs and public. So we'll just take a mental note of that. When we take a backup to Dropbox, we'll then see how this changes. And we'll switch back to our dashboard. And then the last setting is authenticate with Dropbox. After you have saved your settings by clicking Save Changes below, then come back here once and click this link to complete authentication with Dropbox. So we've selected Dropbox from the drop-down menu. Lots of drops coming in here. So we've selected Dropbox. We then go down to Save Changes. We go back to the Settings tab. And now we click this link to authenticate with Dropbox. So we'll go and do that now. So it says Updraft Plus would like to access its own folder. Apps Updraft Plus inside your Dropbox. So we'll click Allow. And because I've already signed into Dropbox before to show you my folder structure, I didn't have to enter my username and password. And as we can see, the folder's just auto refreshed and created an apps folder and then an Updraft Plus folder as a subfolder, and there's nothing in here. And this is where the backup files would be stored. So we'll go back up a couple of levels and we'll come back again when we've taken a backup. So we'll switch back to our dashboard. We'll go to settings and we'll just make sure everything looks good. So we've got Dropbox selected still. Okay, so that all looks good. So we'll go back to the current status tab and let's take a manual backup right now. So we'll click backup. We'll include the database, we'll include the files, and we'll send this backup to remote storage, which is now ticked by default. So we'll go down to the Backup Now button, just click that. And we can now see a progress bar. We'll wait for the backup to complete. You can see now it says uploading files to remote storage. So the backup's now been taken, it's now copying them to our Dropbox remote storage. And there we go, the backup has now succeeded and is now complete. Let's go back to our Dropbox folder and we'll go back into Apps, Updraft Plus, and there are our different zip files representing the uploads, themes, plugins, some others, and also the MySQL database. So that was quite straightforward, very simple to configure, and it means that your backups are safely stored now on remote cloud storage, so that if you do lose your website and you've taken local backups, you've always got a remote backup in cloud storage. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. In this lecture, we're going to simulate what I call an I'll know moment, a moment where you've just realized you've either accidentally deleted some content or a hacker has done this and probably more for you. Either way, it's a moment where we identify we have an issue where a restore would, funny enough, come in handy. So we're going to delete a page that I've set up for this demo, some posts and the themes folder to mix it up a bit. Then we'll restore our latest backup from our remote storage on Dropbox that we've set up earlier to get us back to a known working state. So we're on our dashboard again, and we'll quickly go over to our home page of our test website. We have an about page, so this is a WordPress page with some sample text and an image, and then we've got our posts, an editor and a couple of sample posts there. If we go back to the home page, all the posts are listed on the front page here. So these are the 3 posts. If we go back to the back end in the dashboard and we go to pages, we can just see how this correlates in the back end. So that was our about page there, and we go to posts, and these are our 3 posts that we've got set up at the moment, the editor and the New Horizons and New Heights posts. And if we go to our file manager, to our public_HTML web root directory, and just drop down WP-content, we can see here that we have the 2015 theme that's currently the loaded theme on our test site here, and we're just going to delete this directory for good measure. So we'll do that last. We'll go back to our dashboard and we'll just go through some posts and we'll send them to the trash. We'll go to our page and we'll delete that. We'll then go to our file manager and we'll just delete the whole 2015 directory. So a pretty destructive few steps there we've taken, and if we do go back to our home page and refresh it, well, we can see we have pretty much nothing at all. It's completely gone. So this is the oh no moment. So how do we get back to a working state? So let's go back to our dashboard, which we still can access. We'll go down to the settings menu, updraft plus backups. We'll click the restore button and we'll go for the latest backup that I've taken at 1:20 nearly. So we'll click the restore button, and in this case I'm going to restore my themes and my database, because it's the database that holds the content of our pages and posts. We then click the restore button, and now it's retrieving and preparing the backup files from the remote storage location on Dropbox. We'll just wait for that to complete. So the backup archive files have been processed. Now press restore again to proceed with the actual restore. And now we get a progress report. It's restoring the MySQL database tables. It's restored the themes folder, and now we have a message at the bottom saying that the restore is successful. So let's go back to our home page now, and this is the ultimate test. Press refresh and bang, straight back to where we were before our oh no moment occurred. So there are our 3 posts back there, and here's our about page. If we go back and look at the pages and posts from the back end, there's the about page restored nicely, and go to the posts, and there are our posts restored. Go to our file manager and just refresh, and there we can see the 2015 theme has been restored. So we're back up and running. That didn't take too long at all, fairly straightforward. Hope that's been a useful and helpful lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. In this lecture, we're going to now quickly recap on the backup and recovery section. So when you install the Updraft Plus backup plugin, just remember to set up your backup regime. And by regime, I mean the frequency of backups that you need, whether they're hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly, and the retention period, how many backups you want retained. Enable the email reports, so tick the checkbox that I showed in the earlier lectures that sends an email with notifications of backup jobs. And also configure backup to a remote storage of your choice. I've used Dropbox in the demonstrations. So just to run through some dot points over what you need to do in a full disaster recovery when using the Updraft Plus free edition. If you remember, the premium edition backs up everything in your web root directory, which includes the WordPress core files, and the core files aren't backed up with the free edition. So again, looking at the economical versus functionality, in order to do a full disaster recovery with the free edition, you'll need to do a fresh install of WordPress into your hosting provider, install the Updraft Plus backup plugin again, reconnect it to your remote storage that you use to back up to, restore all of the components, and by all of the components I mean, if I quickly switch back to the dashboard, you restore all of these components, the database, plugins, themes, uploads and others are any other directories or files within the wp-content directory. So restore all of the components, upload a backed up copy of your wp-config.php, so just make sure you use the hosting provider's cpanel file manager to keep a local copy of your wp-config.php file, or even just upload it to Dropbox or your remote storage provider too, so you've got at least 2 copies. And similarly the htaccess file that you uploaded to your web root. So that's provided a quick overview of if you need to do a full disaster recovery of your WordPress website, including the WordPress core. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lecture. So you've come a long way, you've installed WordPress securely, you've hardened it, you're now backing it up to remote storage. We're now going to cover off on some ongoing WordPress security best practices. So in this lecture we're going to close the back doors. And by that we're going to use plugins from wordpress.com or a trusted vendor. Remove deactivated or unused plugins. Unused plugins are one less attack vector to worry about, so delete them to eliminate any potential risk. Keep active plugins updated. Most of the time these third-party plugins and themes are the main reason for vulnerabilities in WordPress websites. Attackers can exploit these plugins and themes to gain access to your website or inject malicious scripts. Use a trusted theme vendor. Themes from an untrusted source can contain malware in the code, so review the readme.txt or the release notes of the theme. And if you pay for a premium theme, expect support from the author, documentation, forum access and regular updates addressing bugs, security issues and new features. And remove unused themes as well. So similar to deactivating and removing unused plugins, do the same for unused themes as well. Review the administrator accounts, so going back to role-based access control and administration versus content curation. Minimize the number of administrator accounts that you have, and remember to do all content management under an editor or similar account accordingly. Check your file types in the wp-content uploads directory. We've controlled what file types can be uploaded with htaccess, but every now and then just visibly go into your file manager and just double check that everything is as expected. Review the WordFence traffic logs and email alerts, and ensure that your local PC environment is up to date. So you have operating system patches have been applied, you're running antivirus, and you've performed regular scans. So there's a few tips for ongoing management. I'll see you in the next lecture. In this lecture I want to run through a few password best practices. As you know, you have an administrator account and one or more editor or author accounts on your WordPress website. So let's try and run through a few password best practices when you set those accounts up. So try not to incorporate any of your personal data into your password, such as your first name, last name, date of birth. Passwords should be at least 8 characters long. The longer the better. They should be complex, so use a mixture of lower and uppercase letters, numbers and special characters such as the exclamation mark or question mark, for example. And change passwords on a regular basis, if you can every 60 days or so, for example. And please, no post-it notes. They can be everywhere and anywhere. You take them into a cafe and they're sandwiched in your laptop screen. That's not very good password practice. So no post-it notes. Try and get a password manager, for example, that you can incorporate into your web browser. So I hope that's provided you with some good password tips. I'll see you in the next lecture. In this course conclusion, I'd like to share some final thoughts. So security starts with you, and the fact you've taken this course means that you want to own security, and that's great. So understand it and don't assume your hosting provider takes care of all the security for you. You can't stop a determined hacker, but you can make it very hard for them. For casual or rookie hackers, they'll just move on to another website which hasn't been secured as much and focus on exploiting them. I liken it to securing your home. You put locks on the doors and windows, you might install an alarm and some security screens. And this will deter the casual thief, and hopefully they'll move on to someone else's home that hasn't been as secured as yours. But if a professional thief wants to get in, well, chances are they will. So implementing security is preventative and reduces the risk of a successful attack. Don't underestimate the power of backups. They will save you time and stress when you need to recover. So get your backup regime going, get it backed up to remote storage, and that will give you peace of mind. And by following the steps in this course and adding those layers of security you have learned, you'll have a WordPress website that will serve you well. So good luck, and please reach out to me if you have any questions or feedback.